May 29, 2015 ushered in the first tenure of President Muhammadu Buhari. At the time, the Nigerian economy was faced by an uphill task due to recklessness, corruption, and impunity in government business, leading to serious loss of confidence in the economy by all. It was a tough start, buoyed by a slowdown in global growth and prices of commodities, especially crude oil, the mainstay of the nation's revenue.
We made an assessment and realized that early on that the economy was in trouble and that we were going to go into recession. This assessment was an assessment we made internally as ministers, as an EMT, but also some external consultants that were friends to the administration made similar assessments, and we had interactions with them. It was clear where the economy was going. We were going to slide into recession. The major reasons were: one, the fall in the crude oil price. Secondly, the country had very little savings, so not enough savings to act as a fiscal buffer for us. And then thirdly, we were also over-dependent on importation of a lot of the things that we consume, whether it is fuel or rice or toothpicks, several things that we just employ. And you know, these importations means that we're spending foreign exchange that is already very, very scarce. So the reaction we had was, we did several scenarios of options of how to help, but it was clear that within the timing we were to work with, that we were going to go into recession.
2016 remains a year Nigerians would not forget in a hurry. Recession and stagflation, the worst experience in the country for decades, but Nigeria emerged stronger into positive territory within a short while in 2017, with the new government paying its way out of recession.
That from 2016 that the economy was in negative growth, was able to wipe out negative growth and arrive at 1.3% presently. It's a good indication, because through the some global economic problem that witnessed this administration.
And so we planned for how to pull the country very quickly out of recession. And we agreed that the fastest method was to reflate the economy, and that means spending into the economy, and we chose the spending area carefully. The president approved that we should borrow because revenue is short, that we should borrow, but borrow to fund major capital projects. And that was what we did. And because of that spending, in the first year, for the first time in this country, we were able to release up to 1 trillion naira within the system. The second year, 1.2, the third year, 1.3 trillion. This is spending that, the type of spending that we have never witnessed in this economy, even when oil price was $120 per barrel. So that helped us to come out of recession. We were not the only country that went into recession at that time. Other countries that have similar economic situations like us, especially countries that are large producers of crude oil, also went into recession. But the approach we took helped us to come out of recession before any of those other countries. But it also meant we borrowed, or we made sure that the borrowing was spent on capital projects. These are projects that with time will also help to bring not only economic activity but future revenues for the country.
We met a difficult situation, but the president knew that he was coming to a difficult situation. So he came prepared to deal with it. And so we took decisive measures. In terms of the economy, we started off with short-term measures, which was an expansionary budget, supported by the Strategic Implementation Plan, the SIP, which contained a number of 26 measures which we needed to do.
So the frantic efforts began, which saw a convergence of fiscal and monetary policies, with a view to diversifying the economy, and all efforts were tied to the administration's cardinal principles of transparency and accountability, two factors that restored confidence of the world in Nigeria.
In any event, you still have a lot of corruption fighting back. The system fights back, and it's both an internal and external fight back. And you have to be steadfast and strategic to win the battle. There is no way that you have a system such as ours that has consistently thrived on corruption and proceeds of corruption, and public finance in particular, that will give up and just roll over and say, hey, guys, the problem has been solved. No. It's a system that has fed on corruption. It's a system that has actively dwelt on corruption. And it's a system that affects all aspects of governance. So so clearly, trying to deal with it is certainly not a walk in the park.
The reform started in the financial sector, aimed at halting wastages in governance and reducing fiscal leakages while shoring up the nation's revenue base, refinancing high-cost short-term domestic debt with relatively cheaper and longer-tenured external debt, asset tracking and management projects, fiscal sustainability plans, and budget support facility for states of the Federation who were mostly bankrupt and couldn't even pay salaries.
And since then, growth has been on a positive trajectory. We also targeted to make sure that we have a stable exchange rate, and the monetary authorities have worked very hard towards. I recall that at some point the dollar was almost 500 naira to $1 US. Today we can say up to 2 years now, at least there's relative stability of the exchange rate, and so there's predictability by businesses, and also especially in the area of trade. Other target was we were to bring down inflation, which at some point climbs to 18% to a single digit by the year 2020, and that is actually very fast approaching, because now we're at 11.2%, and by 2020 we hope that by the end of 2019 that we will be 10 or sub 10. So we'll have achieved our target 1 year ahead of the time that we set.
For the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, we said our #1 priority would be and is to be the enabling ministry for industry, trade and investment. That we're there to enable, to support, to facilitate, to help those that are players in the industry, trade and investment sectors of the economy, right? And all our policy thrusts and all our interventions and reforms and initiatives have focused on achieving this important overarching objective.
There's been a significant changes in terms of volume of what is going out. Sesame seed, for example, we're doing close to about 500,000 tons from Nigeria, and almost 95 or 97% of that is going for export. We're seeing increasing demand day by day from various countries who want the sesame seed from Nigeria. You look at cashew nut as well. Cashew has had problem in the past 1 or 2 years, I'll say. But this year, there's been a significant upward movement in terms of the volume that is going out. Prices are a bit low at the moment. Prices started very well, but a bit low at the moment. But compared to same time last year, I think we're in a better position right now.
Then came the aggressive and successful implementation of the Treasury single account in the first year of the administration. The whistleblower policy and a tight monetary stance by the monetary authorities became the magic wands that were setting the foot of the Nigerian economy back on track.
A lot of eyes are on Nigeria, and we must work hard to aggressively push up our growth numbers. But I'm hopeful that that this can be achieved, given the kind of discussion that have gone on, even after the President Muhammadu Buhari won the election, that at this time we will need to work about consolidating growth. We need to work about creating more jobs for our people, and that there is also a need for us to diversify the economy.
When I moved to the Ministry of Finance, the fiscal situation that I found here is a very tight one. Government finances are very, very tight, and yet across government, people don't realize that money is short, and therefore people need to be cautious in their expenditure and also be selective in where and how they place their money. So people are always asking for money to do so many different things, as if the resources that we have are unending. And it's not true. We're in a very tight fiscal position. So that for me is a burden that I live here with every day. Every sector, every ministry, every department, everybody has a need for financing. And of course, we're not able to meet the needs of everybody. So one has to prioritize within the resources that you have. And you can imagine what that means. Some people will not be happy. Even the ones that you provide funding to are not happy because you're not able to give them everything that they are asking for. So that is tough.
To truly drive investments and promote diversification, the government developed a homegrown economic model, the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan (ERGP), which is a medium-term plan focused on rebuilding a resilient economy. The key execution priorities of the ERGP include stabilizing the macroeconomic environment, achieving agriculture and food security, ensuring energy sufficiency in power and petroleum products, improving transportation infrastructure, as well as driving industrialization, focusing on small and medium enterprises, SMEs.
Those were part of my marching orders. As the Minister for Budget and National Planning, it was my job to coordinate the production of a plan that reflected Mr. President's priorities. If you recall, when he campaigned, Mr. President had campaigned on a very clear issues. One was security, two, anti-corruption, third was to restore the economy. So it was very clear. So we had a clear directive, clear objective. So it's Mr. President's plan. It is my responsibility as the Minister of Budget and National Planning to coordinate that plan, as well as Mr. President's plan. It was always something that was required. It's just that, as I indicated, because of the consultative process that Mr. President insisted on, he wanted everybody to be part of this Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. So because of that, we had the consultative process of meeting with National Assembly, meeting with the private sector, and so on. But even while we were doing that, we had anticipated many of the things in the plan, and they were already built into the 2016 budget and built into the SIP, which we produced. So many of the things there. And what were the essential elements of the plan already built in? The President wanted us to move as a nation from a consuming nation to a producing nation. He wanted us to be the powerhouse of production in Africa. So the plan is aimed at achieving that purpose. So the objective was always clear. The plan was basically to now develop the methodology of achieving those objectives.
So when we developed the ERGP, we consulted widely different stakeholders. And the interesting thing is we wanted guidance from Mr. President, and his focus area was agriculture. And he said, and we quoted in the ERGP, he said, we must grow what we eat and we must consume what we produce. That means we now interpreted that to mean that we must have agriculture and food security, which is one of the key execution priorities of the ERGP. We must have a situation whereby we are able to feed people with food that is grown in Nigeria, that we're not importing the rice that we eat. And when he also said we must consume what we produce, it was also for us an indication that manufacturing sectors must grow, so that all the major items that we use on a very frequent basis are items that are produced in Nigeria. So the ERGP had 5 execution priorities. For the Ministry of Budget and National Planning and Finance, the execution priority of stabilizing the macroeconomic environment was an assignment for the Central Bank, the monetary authorities, the fiscal authorities, finance, as well as budget and national planning. The targets defined under that thematic area have been largely achieved. For example, we targeted a growth rate of 7% by the year 2020. But along the journey, it was that by the first 1.5 years, we would pull the country out of recession, which means moving from a negative growth of 2.6, which is where we attained, to a positive growth. And we did that actually in four quarters instead of the 6 that we targeted.
Now that plan, if you recall, has 3 primary objectives, right? Number 1 is to promote economic growth, quality, sustainable, inclusive economic growth. Number 2 is to invest in our people. And number 3 is to create a competitive economy. If you then come and deal with the priorities of the plan, it says several things that are, that are linked to both my ministry and to the work we do collectively as an economic management team. Number 1, it talks about policy stability and policy coherence, right? So, whether you're dealing with fiscal policies, monetary policies, and then structural policies, which have to do with trade, industry, investment. The policies that change an economy fundamentally over time are called the structural policy, and that's what, where we come in. And those policies were all covered. So if you look at the priorities, for instance, of the ERGP, the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, it talks about food security and importance of agriculture. It talks about infrastructure, power, transport, and so on. Then it talks about industrialization. And under industrialization, we focus on both SMEs and sectors. And in all those areas, we've worked coherently and cohesively, to try and move the agenda of the government and Nigeria forward. I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. If you look at the council that the president set up to drive industrialization, the Nigerian Industrial Policy and Competitiveness Advisory Council. That council includes the Minister of Budget and National Planning, myself, and other members. I'm the vice chairman of the council, and the chairman of the council is the vice president. But we all have to work together to deal with the problems confronting industry in order to achieve our aspirations for industry, for economic growth, and also for job creation. And it's a collective effort, like you said. If you look at what the Ministry of Budget and National Planning led in terms of focus labs, which was basically a way to attract investors into the economy and deal with whatever bottlenecks were stopping those who are already trying to invest. We also, I think, were responsible for, 2 of the areas, to do with processing and value adding and manufacturing. So there's a lot of collaboration that takes place. And if you look at the focus labs again, the success of the focus labs is exactly the priority number 5 under my ministry, which is to proactively promote and attract foreign and domestic investments. And that's also what the focus labs were focused on. So we are really pursuing one objective in essence. And I think we are following the principle of one government.
The inflation rate as an inception was actually, because of the negative growth we witnessed, the inflation was 9% as at 2015, moved to 16% as 2017 because of the macroeconomic issues. Then today, the inflation has come down to 11%. The government actually done well from the high inflation rate of 16% to 11%.
The Buhari administration shored up investments and embarked on reforms in the following areas: ease of doing business, industrialization, attracting investments, MSME development, and fostering value chains. The 4-year period saw a reduction in bottlenecks associated with access to credit, a viable social investment program, and an agricultural revolution.
The whole agricultural sector is not seen in the old context like it used to be seen before. Before, people probably thought that farmers are just old people who will hold their hoes at their back and walk and go to the farm. But right now, it's agribusiness. So there's a whole ecosystem around agriculture. So you need technology now, and sitting down in your office, you are part of the ecosystem, you are part of the agribusiness. So we are seeing significant move of young people going in to create various avenues of services which they can provide to the farmers.
For me, that is the most significant development in the polity yet, because it then means that my theory that democracy in Africa is a fallacy because of extreme poverty is being proved. A time is coming in the very near future when politicians will not find people rushing to their homes to collect handouts, but have to go to farms and villages to beg voters. Then democracy will become quite serious, because you have to be able to convince them that you have something you've done for them before, or you are going to do for them, to persuade them to leave their farms and come and attend your rallies.
Within the 4-year period, the administration saw the establishment of key finance development institutions like the Development Bank of Nigeria (DBN), the Nigeria Incentives Risk-Based Sharing System for Agricultural Lending (NISAL), and the National Microfinance Bank to boost access to credit for the micro, small and medium sectors. The Bank of Agriculture is also in the process of recapitalization.
When you combine the two sources of finance, developmental financing and private financing, that reduces the burden, the budgetary burden on the government itself. And this is the way to go. So I could say there has been an alignment of the stars between the fiscal side and the monetary side in support of agriculture, and things can only get better.
Handlers of the economy say the Buhari administration in his second tenure will focus on consolidating on gains recorded during the first, with human capital development targeted to receive greater attention.
It will be basically delivering on unfinished business, continuing the implementation of the ERGP, because it remains very, very relevant today as it was in 2016. The key priority areas in the ERGP are relevant, but we're advising additional focus on, already we have a social investment program. So this time around, we're saying the social investment program should also be concentrating more on reducing poverty. And that the next time around, we must have a special priority program that is building human capital. And that is additional prioritization on education and on health. Because investing in human capital is very critical for a sustainable growth of any economy. And also in the fight against corruption, which has been a priority, that the fight should continue and be sustained, but it should also go beyond government to spread to the wider society. Because the thing is, corruption is a two-way traffic. It's not one person. So if you take bribe, it is a business giving somebody in government. So we have to also look beyond just the government official taking to the businesses that are given. We are recommending those things, and of course also sustaining the effort on security to make sure that there is comfort for the security of and welfare of the citizen, which is a primary responsibility of government.
If you have an educated population, a healthy population, you can actually turn a population growth to a strength. Because when you use your population, you can actually increase your rate of growth. So definitely we want to be prepared for it. We want to prepare for the incoming population, particularly the youths. We believe that it is important that we design programs for the youth, and which is why you've been seeing a lot of things rolled out for youth empowerment, particularly around the N-Power, skill acquisition, training them in high-tech, IT, savvy, and so on. So those are the things that we are doing. Also, we believe that it's important to educate women, because by educating women, you can end up having fewer children and also reducing your rate of population growth. Other countries have used that and it has worked. When you educate women, you find that they are more conscious, they are more ambitious, and therefore you tend to find that that also leads to reduction in the population growth rate. Having said that, our policies are designed to ensure that we can cope and that we can use our rising population as a strength as opposed to a problem.
The focus and consistency with which the first 4 years of the Buhari government restored investors' confidence, especially his re-election, means that consolidating on what have so far been built is on the horizon.